At my 60th birthday dinner, my daughter-in-law slid a quitclaim deed across the table and said, "Just transfer the beach house before dessert." I smiled, opened my handbag, and pulled out the envelope that put an end to her little plan. "Just transfer the beach house before dessert," my daughter-in-law, Heather, said, casually reaching for another slice of prime rib. Right then, at my 60th birthday dinner, it hit me like a ton of bricks. My kindness over the last few years had been completely mistaken for weakness. My son, Julian, stared intently at his plate, unable to look me in the eye, let alone stand up to his wife. Heather wore that smug, self-assured smirk she always put on whenever she thought she held all the cards. She genuinely believed I was just a lonely widow who would do anything to keep the peace and stay close to the family. To her, that cottage in Cape Cod, the one my late husband and I had painstakingly renovated with our own two hands, was just an unearned asset that practically belonged to them anyway. I didn't feel like crying, nor did I feel the urge to lose my temper. Instead, a wave of profound, liberating clarity washed over me. For months, I had quietly put up with Heather micromanaging my life, penciling me in as their free, on-call babysitter, and making me feel like a guest in my own home. She clearly expected me to give a submissive nod, grab a pen, and sign the deed she'd already laid out on the table. Julian cleared his throat, but stayed silent, which only solidified my resolve. I calmly reached for my purse resting on the chair beside me and unzipped it. Instead of picking up her paperwork, I pulled out a thick, heavy manila envelope and set it right in the middle of the table. The smug look on Heather's face instantly vanished the second she caught sight of the logo on the front. She had no idea that this envelope was about to completely derail her comfortable little lifestyle. The envelope sat heavy between the crystal glasses and the untouched dinner, and you could practically cut the tension in the room with a knife. Heather stared at the paper, her mind visibly racing as she tried to make sense of what was happening. Julian shifted uncomfortably in his chair, still not daring to actually pick up the envelope. I casually took a sip of my water, savoring the sudden silence and watching them like a hawk. There were no tears, no bitter accusations, and no dramatic outbursts. That just wasn't my style. Life had taught me that actions speak a hell of a lot louder than words, especially when money is involved. Heather had assumed she could corner me, using the unspoken threat of cutting me off from my grandkids if I didn't play ball. "What is this, Mom?" Julian finally asked, his voice sounding entirely too small and timid for a grown man. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I slowly smoothed out the envelope with the palm of my hand, letting the suspense build. Heather was losing her patience. A faint flush of anger crept up her neck because things weren't going according to her script. She had expected me to make excuses or beg for forgiveness for turning them down. Instead, she was looking at a woman who was in total control of the room and had absolutely no intention of backing down. I slowly opened the flap, pulled out the first document, and slid it directly over Heather's plate. The moment her eyes scanned the first few lines, every last drop of her confidence drained right out of her face. The paper wasn't some complex legal brief. It was a cold, hard, itemized breakdown of every single financial handout I had given them over the last 3 years. I had logged every single dime from Julian's $4,500 transmission repair and Heather's high-end $800 espresso machine to their weekly $300 grocery runs. The Cape Cod house wasn't just sitting idle. It was my primary source of rental income. the cushion that kept my retirement secure after my husband passed. Heather had treated my bank account like a bottomless well that she was entitled to dip into without ever giving anything back. The list was long, precise, and left absolutely no room for excuses or guilt trips about family obligations. Julian looked at the grand total at the bottom of the page and swallowed hard. While Heather opened her mouth to protest, "This is a ledger of what you owe me," I said, my voice steady, professional, and brook no argument. I informed them right then and there that I had already canceled the monthly auto insurance subsidy and revoked her access to my authorized credit card. Heather tried to raise her voice, stammering about family values and helping each other out through thick and thin. I didn't let her get on her high horse. I simply raised a hand, cutting her off instantly without needing to shout. My mind was made up, and I had spent weeks quietly and thoroughly laying the groundwork for this day. The financial free ride they had so shamelessly taken for granted was officially over tonight. I stood up from the table to execute the next phase, which was going to hit their daily routine even harder. I walked out to the foyer, grabbed a small wooden box from the entryway console, and brought it back to the dining room. Inside that box were the spare keys to my son's apartment. Alongside the spares they kept for my place. I took my house keys back and dropped Julian's apartment keys onto the table with a sharp, metallic clink. Starting tomorrow, I am no longer letting myself into your apartment to do your laundry or dropping off your groceries, I said flatly. Heather stared at me, completely dumbfounded, because she had come to view my free labor as a basic utility. She had been treating my home like a revolving door hotel, coming and going as she pleased, with zero respect for my privacy. Julian looked at me with pure panic in his eyes, knowing full well the mountain of chores that was about to land squarely on their laps, without my daily, unpaid help running their household. Their perfectly curated, effortless life was going to devolve into absolute chaos within a week. Heather tried to pivot, softening her tone and putting on an act of being deeply wounded to her core. She accused me of being selfish, asking how a mother could just abandon her own kids over an old house by the beach. I just gave her a tired, knowing smile. I was completely immune to her guilt trips by now. I had drawn a line in the sand that went into effect immediately, and I was just getting started before the bill arrived. I had one more reality check to deliver regarding the beach house. As for the beach house, I continued, pulling the final document from the manila envelope, there's been a change in management. Heather's eyes lit up with a brief flicker of hope, assuming I was finally throwing them a bone or offering a compromise on using it. I shut that down instantly by sliding a freshly printed, standard short-term lease agreement across the table. I explained that as of the first of the month, the property was officially listed with a property management company for peak season vacation rentals to supplement my income. If they wanted to spend a weekend down there, they would have to book it and pay the standard market rate, just like any other tourist. Julian stammered that the house was supposed to be their inheritance, so they shouldn't have to pay a dime. I gently reminded him that an inheritance only kicks in after you die. And at the moment, I was feeling incredibly healthy and active. Heather realized that her usual threats of withholding the grandkids weren't fazing me anymore, and the sudden loss of leverage left her visibly flustered. The idea of having to pay cold, hard cash to stay at her mother-in-law's house completely shattered her sense of entitlement. She had never chipped in a single dollar for property taxes or upkeep, yet she expected to reap all the luxury for free. I calmly packed my copies back into my bag and finished my glass of water without rushing. My birthday dinner was over as far as I was concerned, and I felt a profound sense of peace as I stood up to leave them with the bill. I caught a glimpse of their shell-shocked faces. They still had no clue that the biggest shift had already happened. Every story on Quiet Revenge is created with care and respect for the people who watch us, while AI may assist with certain parts of the creative process. Every story is personally selected, edited, reviewed, and produced by our team to ensure it carries genuine emotion and meaning, because our channel's monetization is currently unavailable. Your support helps us continue creating the stories this community has come to love. If our videos have ever comforted you, inspired you, or simply made your day a little brighter, please consider supporting Quiet Revenge with the cost of a small cup of coffee. Patreon, https://www.patreon.com/Quiet Revenge Family. Kofi, https://go-fi.com/Thestry Family. PayPal, https://www.paypal.com/paypalme/Kanhwangmin. Thank you for being part of our journey. The very next morning, I didn't waste a single second putting the rest of my plan into motion. A local locksmith I had hired discreetly weeks in advance pulled into my driveway at exactly 8 in the morning. Within 30 minutes, he had swapped out the deadbolts on both my front and back doors, completely rekeying the house. Julian and Heather no longer possessed a working key to my home, meaning they could no longer just barge in whenever they felt like it. I paid the locksmith in cash, took the shiny new set of keys, and felt an incredible weight lift off my chest. My home was finally my sanctuary again, safe from my daughter-in-law's constant, disrespectful drop-ins and boundary-crossing snooping. Right around noon, I heard the telltale scratching of someone trying to force an old key into the front door lock. It was Heather, dropping by unannounced as usual, likely intending to reopen yesterday's argument and browbeat me into submission. When the key wouldn't turn, she rattled the brass handle in frustration and began knocking loudly on the heavy wood. I walked upstairs, opened the window overlooking the porch, and looked down at her calmly. I told her flat out that visits were now strictly by appointment only, requiring a phone call and an explicit invitation. Heather was absolutely boiling, but she quickly realized she was locked out and there wasn't a damn thing she could do about it. She turned on her heel and stormed off, completely unable to process the fact that I had actually cut off her access. 2 days of beautiful, uninterrupted silence passed before my phone started buzzing on the kitchen counter on Thursday evening. It was Julian, and his voice over the speaker sounded incredibly drained, stressed, and completely overwhelmed by their new daily reality. He launched into a long tirade about how chaotic the apartment was, the mountains of laundry piling up, and the nightmare of managing the kids' schedules. Heather was apparently refusing to lift a finger or compromise her lifestyle, so the entire burden had fallen squarely on his unprepared shoulders. He practically begged me to just come over for a few hours this weekend to help them deep clean and catch up. I listened to him vent patiently, never interrupting or throwing his past spinelessness back in his face. When he finally ran out of breath, I took a slow, calm breath and gave him a firm, unequivocal no. I told him plainly that he was a grown man with a wife and kids, and figuring out his own household logistics was his job, not mine. It was high time he stepped up, took accountability, and stopped using his mother as a shield against his own life choices. Heather had spent years treating me like an unpaid maid, and he had stood by and watched just to avoid having an uncomfortable talk with his wife. The call ended without a screaming match, but with a crystal clear, unyielding boundary established for my future. I hung up the phone and went right back to reading my book without a single shred of guilt. In my mind, the final phase of my independence was already in motion. On Friday morning, I packed my large suitcase into the trunk of my car without an ounce of rush or anxiety. I had made up my mind to spend the next several months living down at the Cape Cod house full-time. I had coordinated the entire transition on the quiet. Without dropping a single hint to Julian or Heather, the main house was already booked solid by affluent vacationers for the first half of the season, which provided a massive boost to my bank account. I would be staying in the cozy, private studio apartment above the detached garage, which was more than enough space for just me. The rental income effectively doubled my monthly cash flow, guaranteeing a comfortable life completely free of anyone else's input. As I pulled out of my driveway, I spotted Julian standing across the street, just getting home from his shift. He stared at my packed car in absolute disbelief, then hurried across the asphalt and tapped frantically on my driver's side window. I rolled it down just a crack, meeting his panicked gaze with a calm, serene smile. He looked completely unraveled as he asked where on earth I was going and who was supposed to help them manage everything while I was gone. I told him simply that I was taking a well-deserved, open-ended vacation, and that it was going to be a very long time before I came back. Heather had wanted the beach house, but I was the one who was going to be living there and enjoying the ocean breeze. I shifted into drive, rolled past him, and left the suburbs in my rearview mirror, weeks blurred together by the coast. And the rhythmic sound of the ocean completely replaced the toxic stress and entitlement of my old life. Through a few mutual friends back home, I caught wind of how drastically things had imploded at my son's apartment. Without my financial cushions and daily labor keeping them afloat, they had been forced to drastically scale back their lifestyle and budget down to the penny. Heather actually had to take a part-time job at a local boutique just to cover the monthly payments on the luxury SUV she couldn't afford. Julian was spending his evenings cooking, scrubbing toilets, and folding laundry chores. He hadn't touched since he moved out of my house. Their marriage was hitting a major rough patch because reality had finally caught up to them, and they no longer had me to blame. They tried calling me multiple times, but I rarely picked up. And when I did, I kept the conversations brief, polite, and entirely superficial. I stopped offering advice, stopped sending emergency Venmo transfers, and absolutely did not volunteer to babysit. Whenever Heather tried to subtly steer the conversation back toward the property or family investments, I immediately pivoted or politely wrapped up the call. They had tried to push me out of my own life, only to find themselves trapped in a financial cage of their own making. I didn't feel an ounce of pity, nor did I feel any petty malicious joy, just a profound, unshakable peace with the path I had chosen. I had protected my peace and my property through quiet, decisive action without ever raising my voice. My focus was entirely on myself now. Today, I'm sitting on the deck of my beach house, holding a hot cup of coffee and watching the seagulls drift over the Atlantic. The breeze has a crisp chill to it, but the morning sun feels warm on my face, and I feel lighter than I have in a decade. My 60th birthday wasn't the sad end of an era. It was the starting gun for a beautiful, self-determined chapter of absolute independence. Julian sent me a long text yesterday, and for the very first time in his adult life, He offered a real, raw apology. He admitted that they had taken advantage of my kindness, and that my sudden exit was the wake-up call he desperately needed to grow up. I texted him back, saying I accepted his apology, but made it clear that my current living arrangement is permanent. Any future relationship with them will be strictly on my terms, built on a foundation of mutual respect and unbreakable boundaries. Heather learned the hard way that you cannot demand respect by manipulating or bullying the people who hold you up. I no longer feel the need to maintain a facade of a perfect family or attend forced holiday dinners just to feel validated. My home belongs to me. My time is entirely my own, and my money is spent strictly on creating a life I love. I look out at the endless horizon and know with every fiber of my being that I made the right call at the exact right moment. Life is entirely too short to spend it catering to people who only value you for what they can take from you. Every story on Quiet Revenge is created with care and respect for the people who watch us. While AI may assist with certain parts of the creative process, every story is personally selected, edited, reviewed, and produced by our team to ensure it carries genuine emotion and meaning. Because our channel's monetization is currently unavailable. Your support helps us continue creating the stories this community has come to love. If our videos have ever comforted you, inspired you, or simply made your day a little brighter, please consider supporting Quiet Revenge with the cost of a small cup of coffee. Patreon https://www.patreon.com/Quiet Revenge Family. Kofi https://go-fi.com/Thistry Family. PayPal https://www.paypal.com/PayPalme/Kanhuangmin. Thank you for being part of our journey.